Corrections officers need to be adept, highly knowledgeable, and trained in the following key concepts: 1. Defensive tactics, 2. Restraining devices, 3. Use of force, 4. Cell extraction, 5. Inmate transport, and 6. Riot control. The first of which, defensive tactics, are typically applied with the bare hands or light equipment, such as mace, pepper balls, or other materials. These are non-lethals, and the goal of defense tactics are to subdue or immobilize the assailant, not to kill or permanently disable the person. Next is restraining devices. These can be physical restraints or other methods, such as mechanical restraints, like handcuffs and leg irons, pinion restraints, such as restraint chairs and swaddling devices, electronic restraints, such as taser guns and stun shields, and chemical restraints, such as tear gas and pepper sprays. Next is use of force. In the corrections environment, corrections officers are required to use force. In extraordinary circumstances, a corrections officer is justified in the immediate use of force. That is, that he can exercise discretion on the matter without waiting for certs or an emergency team to back him up. The officer will take full responsibility for the action and must be fully cognizant of their own rights and responsibilities, as well as the rights and responsibilities of the individual they use the force against. It can go from the bare minimum force, which is verbal commands, or lethal force. Next is cell extraction, which is the forcible removal of a stubborn or potentially dangerous inmate or inmates from their cells. These can be carried out in response to a multitude of potential situations, and there is no one way to go about doing so. It's usually undertaken by teams, and it requires a necessary extraction, which is done by a specialized team inside the prison. There are a variety of methods in which people do this, usually stacking up behind a shield. Next is inmate transport, which is one of many assignments that correctional officers may receive. However, it is very vital for public safety, as well as the safety of the inmates, properly restraining them, and making sure they do not escape or are broken out from a third party are vital. Next is riot control. Riots can be a potentially dangerous situation for everyone in the prison and everyone involved. The use of tear gas, potentially lethal force from the towers, and other methods to control riots quickly and safely are very much needed in the field. Riots usually happen indoors. However, outdoor riots in the yard are common as inmates are gathered in large areas.
Corrections officers undergo similar training to that of police officers. Their training can be broken down into two different portions: classroom-based training and practical skills training. The first part of classroom-based training is rehabilitative training, in which will help those who suffer from substance abuse problems or mental health issues. Secondly, they'll undergo legal training, in which they'll study all types of law, but more importantly, criminal law, arrest procedures, and use of force policies. They may undergo other specialized training, such as training for juvenile corrections or death row corrections. Their practical skills training is going to start out with procedural training, which may include restraint techniques, searches or strip searches, riot control, ethics, and first aid CPR. They also undergo firearms training, as well as in-service training. Lastly, they have basic fitness training, in which they train in a variety of different physical tasks. What do corrections officers keep on their duty belt? Well, they usually have a keychain for all their keys, MK3 pepper spray, gun holster for their firearm, although they do not carry firearms actively inside the prison, handcuffs, gloves, radio, flashlight, and other materials they may need.
According to the textbook, there are 5 situations in which it is legally acceptable for officers to use force: self-defense, defense of third persons, the upholding of prison rules, the prevention of a crime, and the prevention of escapes. Present in this video is an example of excessive force used by correctional officers. To follow are cases related to excessive force.
Keith Hudson, a Louisiana inmate, claimed that he was beaten by Marvin Woods and Jack McMillan, two prison guards, while the supervisor Arthur Mazo watched. Hudson sued the guards in federal district court under 42 U.S.C. 1983, which allows individuals to bring suit for the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution. Hudson argued that they have violated his Eighth Amendment right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment. The district court ruled that the guards had used force when there was no need to do so, violating the Eighth Amendment, and that Hudson was therefore entitled to damages. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed, however, finding that an inmate must demonstrate significant injury when he claims that his Eighth Amendment rights have been violated by the use of excessive force. The conclusion of this case was a 7-2 decision for Hudson. The Supreme Court held that the degree of injury suffered by an inmate is one of several important factors in the Eighth Amendment claim of cruel and unusual punishment, but that the absence of significant injury alone does not mean his rights have not been violated. In May 2010, Michael Kingsley, who was being held as a pretrial detainee in Monroe County Jail, was ordered to take down a piece of paper covering the light above his cell bed, but refused to do so. After Sergeant Stan Hendrickson ordered Kingsley to take down the paper several times and each time was met with refusal, Lieutenant Robert Conroy, the jail administrator, ordered the jail staff to take down the paper and transfer Kingsley to another cell. In the new cell, when Kingsley resisted the officer's attempts to remove the handcuffs, Hendrickson put his knee in Kingsley's back and Kingsley yelled at him. Kingsley also claimed that Hendrickson smashed his head into the concrete bunk. After further verbal exchange, another officer applied a taser to Kingsley's back. Kingsley sued Hendrickson and other jail staff members and claimed that their actions violated his due process rights under the 14th Amendment. The jury found the defendants not guilty. Kingsley appealed and argued that the jury was wrongly instructed on the standards for judging excessive force and intent. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit reversed. The conclusion of this case was a 5-4 decision in favor for Kingsley. The court held that the objective standard is in line with the existing precedent that holds the Due Process Clause, protects pretrial detainees from excessive force that amounts to punishment, which can be shown through evidence that proves that the force in question was not reasonably related to the legitimate purpose of holding detainees for trial.
Annually, correctional officers end their careers in disgrace by committing activities that are deemed illegal or, at the very least, highly unethical. For example, in convict criminologist John Irwin's 2005 study, he finds that officers may engage in inmate brutality or that they have looked away and allowed offenders to assault one another without any repercussions. Research shows that high stress levels can also lead to frustration, negative work-related attitudes, and emotional exhaustion. Correctional officers are oftentimes overworked, which over time can lead to job burnout. Research has shed light on a concept such as organizational justice, which focuses on two concepts: procedural justice and distributive justice. Both concepts provide great ideas for developmental factors that can benefit staff and inmates. It was discovered that private maximum security prisons with organizational justice experience fewer staff-related problems, leading to a reduction in job burnout and stress with their correctional staff. Now I ask you, how many times must inmates complain over excessive force until something within the system will change?